Hey everybody, welcome to the Curious is Better podcast. I'm Craig Lamb with Invative, and we got a really good one today. Today we're speaking with Eric Beckwitt from Freightera. Thanks for joining, Eric. I appreciate it very much. And I want to jump right in because you and I have had a discussion before we did the podcast, talk about some of the stuff that we're going to talk about. And I was super curious about your journey. I want you to share some details about how you went from, I'll let you tell the story from environmental science to where you are.
Absolutely. Yes. I started actually my career, as Craig mentioned, in environmental science. I've always made my living in actually computer science, but it was the application of geographic information systems to environmental planning. So at that time, this was geographic information systems it was a new field. You couldn't study it in university. The only way to do it, you had to take the books and look at the code and figure out how to make it work. And so we were working at the interface between using satellite imagery and building our own original data sets and looking at land use planning and sustainability from a computer science and mapping perspective. Nothing was available. Everything had to be built by hand from using all the software at the time.
Right, but then continue because that brought you into some other stuff. You did some nonprofit stuff, and then had a software company. You're editing yourself because
I
I think the
did.
journey is so super cool.
I did. I did. What happened is that being in environmental science, I was paying attention to environmental health, and my wife and I, as a young family, we built our dream house in the Sierra Nevada, in the northern part of the Sierra Nevada, and settled down and had our children. And one of our youngest son got very sick with asthma, and I started to dig into why. And so did my wife, who's an environmental journalist by training, dig into what could be causing it. And we found that we did some original research, and we found that we were right in the center of the worst plume of ground level ozone contamination, which is one of the primary pollutants from automobiles um, downstream from the Bay Area, from the San Francisco Bay Area and Sacramento. And a lot of families, in fact, every family in the community had one or more persons that was sick with asthma. So we realized that, mapped out where the plume extended to, and moved up to the north, out of the United States, actually up to the north, to the southwest coast of Canada, where we could get into cleaner air near the coast and we had affordable housing. So we moved up there and switched positions at that time. I went from environmental GIS as a consultant, working for one of the big consulting firms in Sacramento, to building a web development company and supporting large international organizations working primarily actually in human health. These are big nonprofit organizations that focus on, just as you mentioned, Craig, they focus on their medical science and they focus on community issues that affect public health. So we worked with those for several years, and then we started working with for-profit entities that wanted to create original software because what we effectively were doing is building very large international business systems for nonprofits. And then we shifted to building business systems for profits and started getting involved as on the board and getting involved as major shareholders in these startups.
And that brought you to Freightera because you were writing custom platforms. Like I was super interested in the trajectory because you and I shared a story that I had early on, right? Like our first major system was for a national non-for-profit, right, with the Leukemia Lymphoma Society here in the States, and so we shared a very similar journey, and that we built custom systems, and you built custom systems, and it brought you to finding yourself in that logistics market with Freightera, right? So you're the co-founder and it's CEO, but you're also the thought leader, right? The technologist behind that as well.
Yes, and so when we created my wife and business partner, we ran a previous company together. We ran a small global web development company, and when we created Freightera, it was informed by both our experience building software, but also our experience in environmental science, environmental journalism, and personally protecting the health of our child. So we knew a lot of people were suffering from asthma and from air pollution, and we wanted to have as a mission of the company to do the very best we could to reduce air pollution from heavy transportation, heavy trucks. Um, and so we set out to do that. It's a long, slow process because the transition to zero emission vehicles is painfully slow. But we have made significant progress in partnership with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and Natural Resources Canada's program for emissions tracking and reduction. So we were approached by Natural Resources Canada, to help them promote these lower emission carriers, and that's actually working quite very well. But it comes back down to the original intention behind the program. What are you trying to do? And the other thing that's very important is that the working with nonprofits first, you realize that these nonprofits are big businesses. They just aren't designed for, they're designed, they're service organizations. They're not designed necessarily to make a profit. And frankly, all the best companies are also that way. They all have a component, they have a service component. That's why they're good. They're good because they understand that people need this particular thing. Product needs to be designed specifically for them. It needs to be fair. The pricing needs to work well. It needs to work well for both parties. So that's actually, I've joked that we all business people should be required as part of their training to work for nonprofits for several years so that when they create a company, there's a strong public interest component in it because that's not an anathema to profit. You actually do better when you design a system that's fundamentally helpful for both sides. People appreciate you and work with you more than something that's designed fundamentally to exploit people. Okay. So that's we want to avoid that at all costs. We really want to create an excellent platform that benefits both the transportation companies and the shippers, and we're doing our best to stay focused on that mission.
I like that. I like that like that's like part of your core, like just your essence, where it's like do good first, and then the business piece, kind of comes with, like, in tandem, in lockstep, right? I think it's interesting. Well, why don't we take a minute too? Why don't you talk about what Freightera is and what it does, what it solves?
Forterra is a platform. It's designed for it's a two-sided platform in that on one hand it provides a service to transportation companies. These are companies that own trucks, but they also own airplanes and they own they are the railroad systems. And it allows these people and these companies, regardless of whether they own a single vehicle or whether they're Canadian National Rail, to reach a large group of industrial shippers. And so they can actually see at any given time what is the best rate, what is the best transit time, and what is the lowest emission option available on that particular route each day. Um, the fundamental problem for these companies is it's a very fragmented market. There's by an estimated 1.2 million companies operating in the same market. They're driving vehicles and moving vehicles down the same roads every day, partially filled. So there's a huge opportunity to coordinate and actually have these companies focus on just where they're best and not constantly be regenerating traffic and driving to places they shouldn't be driving to. On the other hand, there are about 25,000 businesses that have signed up for us, and these are all industrial companies. If you visualize each one of them, they generally speaking they have a big warehouse or industrial facility. They have large quantities of wholesale product on pallets. They have forklifts, or they are retail stores, or at the smallest case, like delis, where they have a loading dock out the back where their product comes in off trucks. So it's not personal. It's all strictly business to business. Most of these are small businesses, and they have a horrible problem with making certain that they're paying the correct amount for their shipping because no one transportation company covers all of the lanes, connects everywhere. And just because you have an excellent provider in place that does it from, say, a facility you have in Tallahassee, Florida, and you're shipping to a place in Tennessee, if you suddenly need to ship into Canada, you need to ship into some part of Southern California, you don't know that current provider you have has the best service and has the best rates and is the lowest emission option. So we brought together into a single space. We brought together over 20 billion unique lanes. We built a system that allows those things to be queried in a matter of seconds. Our core database operates literally in 1 to 3 seconds. It takes longer to give results because we go out to now over 100 application programming interfaces from the larger transportation companies, and we can't control the speed of those third-party application programming interfaces. You are smiling, but we're doing our very best to continually optimize that process and consolidate it to a
Yeah.
single place. So it's a godsend for the needle in the haystack search. And then on top of that, once you find that rate, you need to have a company that will go to bat for you if the transportation company then refuses to honor that rate. So you have to enter the correct information. You have to be honest. But as a shipper, if you're honest about the product, the size, the weight, dimensions, that it's available on time, you cannot have the transportation company then come back to you and say, nope, we've changed the rates. We've changed our plan. You're going to now owe, instead of $200, you're going to owe $2,000. So in the absence of a platform like this, the transportation companies can do that. And usually they say, oh, it's because it's changed. We couldn't get the truck dispatched on time. There's some reason, honest reason for it, but that's not why the person booked that company. They booked that company because it was going to cost $200. Okay.
Yeah, and you were
And if
telling me
they
that,
know
like
it's going
that.
to cost 2,000, yeah, they never book them. Yeah. Yes. So, that's one of the most important things we've done. It's called rate defense. And we use artificial intelligence in that process. And we use a lot of information that we gathered now that we have successfully delivered to and picked up from between 50 and 100,000 locations in North America. We have a lot of in-house data on exactly what's required to get to that place and what's needed, where the docks are, how it functions. So we have a growing database because sooner or later you serve everywhere. You just keep going, keep picking up and serving everywhere. So that's very, very important. It comes back to intention to be a really good company, and then how you implement a program that solves this fundamental problem. Because depending on the cost of the freight, you can't afford to ship it. You can't afford to. It's your product isn't worth enough. If the freight cost is too high, you just don't do it.
Yeah. Well, you know where I got super curious when we were talking the first time, because I told you we've done projects in logistics, and just normalizing freight data. It's all over the place. You just talked about like hundreds of different systems you're communicating with, and the formats always seems to be different. The protocols always seem to be different. The level of robustness of the data, accuracy of the data. Like, how do you guys manage where it's such soup in our experience?
Yeah,
Um,
yes. So first of all, we go out our way to negotiate rates in advance for consistency for all of the companies, but each company has different approaches to all the different edge cases is the problem. It's not just about the number of pallets and the size and the weight. There's all these different cases in terms of how the freight actually sits in the truck. So you have to actually learn and develop a unique approach to each carrier. And we find that we found after a long time that if an innocent shipper just signs up with a new carrier, they can expect up to $20,000 loss as they learn the actual rules of the carrier. Not what their posted rules are, but actually how they behave in all these situations. When suddenly it's an inch longer than it's supposed to be, what do they actually charge you? If it's dimensional weight changes, what do they actually charge you? How do they function if you suddenly need a tailgate, but you haven't specified a tailgate, or it needs to be inside delivery, or it's delivered to a military base, or it's delivered to a school, or it's delivered to a church, or it's delivered to any number of cases, a construction site where it's not a dock to dock delivery and the actual cost is different. So we understand that from extensive work with each of these transportation companies, build that into the model so that initial rate is accurate. Okay, so it's like training AI. You can't train AI on this because the information is all completely proprietary. You can't just go out and have AI scan for this. This is secret information
sure.
that the pricing and rates are secret to each transportation company. But internal to us, because of volume and because of experience, we can actually know how they behave, and therefore direct the freight to the correct company. That's a really important
That's super
service.
cool, right? So the nuance of relationships, you've created data points to replicate and almost kind of like have a templated roadmap if someone were to engage with carrier XYZ and they're already in your system, you understand that nuance, all those that learning curve is evaporated because your software already
Yes, and it's
knows.
yes, and we've long passed the stage where it's better to actually intervene into the human being. The safest route, you put guardrails into your software to protect people. The safest route is always automatically quoted because that's a much more accurate quote. If you just pick up the phone and call, you'll forget some critical piece of information, or you'll say under this circumstance, and then you'll get dinged. So you want to have that. You always want to operate right down through this idea of having the protection along the edges of the course so you can't hurt yourself as you make your way down the road, right? It's like having soft guardrails
Right.
for each type of operation.
When we talked previously, we were talking about when just in just writing software too, when you talk about workflow automations and things like that. And then you had made a point about being completely touchless versus like human in the loop interventions and things like that. How do you guys set up as far as like rules in that regard? Like where is that called on? Where are things autonomous versus monitored or there's intervention?
There are it all depends on the level of sophistication of the transportation provider and their software. So for those that have really, really excellent systems, we are completely integrated with them. And from the instant that book button is pressed, it's dispatched. It goes right into their system. It's right into their schedule. It lights up on the driver, on the phone of the driver. The driver knows that it has that. Um, and that goes through depending again on the sophistication of their tracking systems and their own internal processes. You have really excellent updating as well. Likewise, you don't. If you don't have that, the company doesn't have that. So it really depends on the individual company. But the increasingly the vast majority of those things are completely 100% automated, booked, dispatched, etc. You still have to have human beings for the edge cases when things go wrong, when there's misfires, who are basically detectives and are saying, wait a second, their system shows it was dispatched, but it's not. This it was here. So that you have to have, and we're continually refining those things and having, that's where artificial intelligence is coming in to track and manage for dashboards to understand the movement of that that freight and understand where it's potentially stuck and the few that still need to be addressed, like 10 out of 1,000 that need to be have a special a human being look at them and go, something is wrong here. It should have been picked up yesterday. Why does it still show it's not moving kind of thing? But each passing month, we get better and better at that. I know you have a question particularly about AI in general, but
Yeah.
it's at first we didn't do anything with AI. 2 years ago, there was basically it seemed there was no use case for it, but now each month there's this growing. It's all behind the scenes. There's no AI chatbots in our company. It's a tool that we use on the other side of human beings. Because I know that the worst case is where it's you reach out to the company and you talk only to artificial intelligence. You can't reach a human being.
Yeah.
Human beings are
For
different.
sure.
Yeah, they're flexible. You can say, no, that's not it. And they're like, oh, I see. And they can get right to it. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You say you haven't had AI since a couple of years back. We talked about this briefly, and we're going to get more into it as far as like agents and stuff like that. But you're you're an engineer. I'm an engineer. We used to take variables, and if those conditions were met, they triggered different workflows. Right? It's if then else, but and on a much larger scale. So there was pattern recognition in software, right? But now it's seems to be has much more agility and elasticity in how you can apply that, right? Where it can start picking up these variables that rather than you having to code them in become inherent based on using agents on on a very
Yes.
small
Yes.
workflow microscope. How did you pick when you first started coding for AI? Like, how did you pick which workflows were going to get your attention just to try stuff out and implementing? I think that
The
because I
most
think that's
onerous.
it's an interesting question just globally, right? When people are like, well, how do we get into AI? And like for us, it's like in our company, first thing we want to do is get into code refactoring, right? And QA, some of the stuff that we know that we're using on a regular basis, things that are like labor intensive for us. We wanted to see how it would work. But I don't know that that translates to just every company to figure out how they start or where they would start.
No,
So,
and it's a very good point. And also remember, AI works so well because so many people have exposed all their code and exposed all their knowledge. You're basically, when you're
uh
dealing with AI, you're dealing with a probabilistic system that is walking you through the thoughts of millions of other people that have
right,
trained it. So you don't want to give up your secret sauce you never want to give out. And so for that reason, we blocked people from using it for the longest time because we didn't want them posting content and saying how to improve this. This is a byproduct of improving it. There it goes. And yes, I know they say that if you pay for an account, it doesn't go. I don't believe that. The assumption, safe assumption is that everything you post is out there, right?
for
So,
sure.
so we had to find a way to be able to use it behind firewalls on our own servers, running in an environment that is safe for us, never exposing the code. The code, of course not. Of course you can't. You have firewalls and protection to protect the secret, the private information of your customers and also the transportation company. So it's tricky, but and it really comes down to the use. It's a collaborative process between your intelligence and artificial intelligence. And the more you know, the more powerful the artificial intelligence is because you use it correctly and you ask the right questions. So it's paradoxically, this is a time when you need to have read 1,000 books. So you can actually ask the right questions and ask, yeah, have you read this? Do you understand this? Yes. But then it says, but have you seen this? And it has 10 other books you haven't seen. So you're like, oh, go over here, but you missed that. Okay. So as a research tool in terms of directing the thought, et cetera. So we're in the early stages, but it's still a baby. And as someone said, despite all the hype, I said it's like a very enthusiastic intern fresh out of university that's totally confident that it knows what it's doing, but it doesn't. And then it's like, I'm sure it's this. And then you're like,
Yeah, you
no,
said that
no,
before. I
that's not
really
right.
like
It's
that
like,
a
I'm
lot.
sorry. Yeah, I'm
I
sorry.
like
Yeah.
that a lot. I like that a lot. Uh, I'm probably gonna steal that there. Just I like that one a lot because when people use like ChatGPT or whatever, and they're like, "Well, I use Chat to build this stuff out." I was like, don't do that blindly, right? I mean, these are patterns. They don't know anything about what you're doing. This is in very general strokes. So now I'm gonna use the intern metaphor to hopefully get people to be more scrutinous of the work that they're producing. I don't know about you, but I can see a paper, an abstract, a plan, and an email a mile away that was written with an AI
Oh yeah.
generator. A
Yes.
mile away.
100%. 100%. 100%. Yeah. Part of it is that it's grammatically perfect. There are key formatting differences that you immediately spot. Human beings make mistakes and they have their own writing style. They're not perfect. They don't think like machines. So yeah, increasingly, yeah, you look for the error and you look for the awkward stuff. And you're like, that's not written by a machine. They
That's
would make
right.
that mistake.
Exactly right.
Yes. But
It's
that's
what
not my idea, this intern thing. That was someone else pointed it out to me. I liked it.
well then I'm going to steal it from who you stole it from. I liked it a lot.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. Exactly. Another CEO.
So there was a couple things I want to talk about with just about development. And so I have a number of clients that consider this all the time, is that they'll ask us to build something for them, and we do, and it works really, really well. And they feel like it can represent an impact on their industry. You had a similar road. You wrote software for someone, and then it kind of evolved through some iterations into Freightera. What challenges would you share, or just, I don't know, points of interest, things to consider of converting something that's been built specifically for a company and then converting it to a commercial platform or a global platform or a proper SaaS, or what are things that you had to take into consideration?
That's a very good question. So one thing we've learned the hard way is that frequently integration of other platforms is a big mistake. We started out building only custom code, and then we're like, why are we reinventing the wheel? Let's integrate this thing. And those are the things we end up really regretting because then we're stuck with some other platform with all of its problems and the maintenance of that platform. It's bad enough to constantly have to update PHP, my Apache, and update your versions of CentOS or Linux, right? Without
Yep.
having to actually deal with the dependencies on these third party things. And frequently they're slow. Um, and and really hurt your performance and hurt your ability to be flexible. So that's over time, we're doing more and more our own custom work. And many companies earlier on would make great successes by just cobbling together 3 or 4 different commercial things on the market and just making something new. So we don't do that. We very reluctantly rely on. That doesn't mean that we don't subscribe and use third-party SaaS systems. We have some, right, for
Sure.
ticketing and for other things like this, 100%. But we do our very, very best now to always evaluate carefully when we're creating a dependency. Does it make sense to do this, or should we actually program just what we need, this unique function, and have complete control of it, and have it sitting on our server? And have it sitting on your server, and you can fix it. When it's sitting on someone else's server, you're so in trouble. And that includes hosting when you're in the Amazon cloud, for example.
Mhm.
Not to pick on Amazon, but when you're in any other large third party system and they go down, it's helpless. You're completely helpless. So for that reason, we're big components of our own dedicated servers, dedicated hypervisors, have your own private cloud, and you control the environment. No one else is in there. No one's going to complain when you reset the thing, when you reboot the thing, when you actually do anything with the thing, because you're the only one there, right? Um,
Mhm.
and you can't be too redundant. You can't have too many versions of your server. You can't have too many backups of things because just when you think you're completely out of the woods, knock, knock, some new curve comes that you didn't imagine, you know?
Yeah, for
And the
sure.
example, there was an example of that years ago. The hosting company we worked with was testing the fire system and they set off the fire system and they sprayed fire retardant on the entire database, data center, took it the whole thing down.
That's
Everything
going to
went
leave a
down.
mark.
They never imagined every computer would go down. And like, it was down for weeks while they scrambled to rebuild the data center. So that's the kind of thing that you have to assume something like that catastrophic happens. That what happens when the data center goes down, not a single cell. Yeah.
Mhm.
It can't be fixed.
Yeah,
So
for
you just
sure.
got to plan for that kind of stuff. Yeah.
There's another topic. We got a little bit more time, but because there's a topic that I loved, I wrote, actually hand wrote it down too, is that you and I were talking about, spoken about like my first client and when we started, you talked about it too. And then you're like, that's one of the biggest founder mistakes. It's like an entrepreneurship. It's like you're hopeful, you're optimistic, you're energetic, uh, you have some temerity, but people also fall short on understanding what kind of perseverance it takes to land client A, learn those lessons and things like that. Like, I'd love you to share some thoughts about anybody that might be listening that has a great idea. They're thinking about getting into building software or system, and any advice you might impart in that regard. Because it resonated with me. We were on the same page, but I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, there's several really important things that are hard. But the first thing is that it's going to take a lot longer than you think to actually get anywhere with a product. It takes a very long time to get it from the idea stage out to actually coded and live. Once you're there, frequently the market doesn't appreciate what you've built. You have to change it to actually get into the mainstream of the market. A lot of times the market never appreciates what you built, regardless how good your idea is. The timing is just wrong, or other hardware or software is not ready for what you've built, which is really frustrating because your idea is fundamentally sound. You have to be ferociously customer focused. You have to really, really listen to your customers, and it's what they care about that matters, not you. So people are in love with their own ideas. But the reality is, if you want to understand what a company is, read their reviews and how the people describe the company. That's the company. Okay, they're describing what they like and what they don't like about it is you, and that's real. And you can't say, "Oh, they don't understand us." No, they understand you better than you do because they're interacting with you. So And you also need to be, no matter how you strongly you feel about a particular issue or a particular approach to the economy or environment or social issues, you really can't proselytize. You have to give people options, trust their fundamental intelligence, and let them make their own decisions. Don't tell them what to do. So that I really am a big believer in giving people options and letting them decide what they want to do. Okay, and that approach goes to like things like emissions reduction. It goes to climate. It goes to social change. It goes to all of these things. You really have to do your very best to just to provide a level playing field, support people, and let them do what they think is right. Okay, and it's individual. It's different with different people.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I really appreciate your insights on that. I want to thank you for joining too. This was fantastic. I had so much fun. Again, everybody, this is the Curious is Better podcast, and we've been talking with Eric Beckwitt from Freightera. I appreciate it very much. I want to thank you for joining.
Excellent. Thank you. Take care.